Welcome to Motor City UK. I'm Rob Capaldi. If you ask 10 people to define the perfect sports car, you'll probably get 10 different answers. Some will talk about power, others about speed, technology or specifications. Alongside these varied responses, there's an idea that all enthusiasts will be sure to agree on, that the very best sports cars don't simply transport you, they involve you. Modern sports cars are faster than ever, with increasing levels of performance and capability, but they're also larger, heavier, and increasingly filtered by layers of technology. Progress has numerically made them better in many ways, yet it's also raised an interesting question. In an increasingly technology-focused world, is there still room for a car that's built simply for the enjoyment of driving? That question led me to a small workshop in the Warwickshire countryside. We know this area is firmly woven into Britain's automotive story. We're surrounded by companies designing, engineering and building some of the world's most recognisable vehicles. Hidden among them is one of the newest names in British motoring. Wells Motor Cars wasn't born out of a large manufacturer, and it's not a venture capital-backed technology startup trying to disrupt the sector. Its founder, Robin Wells, couldn't find the sports car he wanted to own, so he decided to create it himself. The result is the Vertige, a lightweight, hand-built sports car that deliberately pushes against many of the trends that have come to define the modern performance car. Rather than chasing ever greater complexity, the company has focused on lightweight, simplicity and driver engagement. It's an important story as we continue to document the automotive story of Coventry and the surrounding area, not simply because it's about another car, but because it's another chapter in the continuing development of the region. Coventry and Warwickshire have spent more than a century solving engineering problems in different ways. Sometimes through global manufacturers, sometimes through tiny specialist firms, but almost always through people prepared to challenge the accepted thinking. For this episode, we're stepping inside the factory to explore why Wells Motor Cars exists, what inspired Robin to build a sports car from scratch, and whether there is still a place for small British manufacturers in an industry increasingly dominated by scale and technology. Perhaps the best place to begin is with a simple question. Why, in an age of ever-increasing complexity and electric vehicles with mind-boggling straight-line performance, did Robin Wells decide that another supercar was the last thing that the world needed?
The supercar as a genre had less appeal because I think just going faster and louder, there's always going to be someone who can go faster and louder. There's less usable on the modern roads. But a sports car really appealed. The idea of something that focused on involvement and tactility, lightweight, compact size, practical in a way that perhaps supercars can't be. So that was the genesis of the idea, that I wanted to make what in my mind was the perfect sports car, distilling all of the ideas or features that I'd had in some of the supercars, but also taking some ideas from the British low-volume industry that I'd experienced already. I'd owned a couple of Ginettas and a Marcos and so on. So that's where the project started. And it was initially just an idea for myself. I wanted to make a one-off for myself. But fairly soon as the project evolved, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I felt that perhaps that this was viable as a business and that there would be other people interested in what I was trying to achieve, a lightweight, compact sports car that looked beautiful and was fun to drive, but also properly engineered.
What was the turning point for that? Was there a particular moment that you spoke to someone or saw something in the market that triggered that idea that this could be something for the market rather than just yourself?
Yeah. Going back to this idea of having something made for me, I went to look at a couple of high-end continuations, or one particular one was the Listabel Stratos, which is a lovely car, made really nicely. And we looked at the possibility of having one commissioned and made. But as I went further into that, I just thought, why pay to have somebody else's design? Wouldn't it be nicer to make your own design? Because ultimately, you're just driving a replica one way or another. And so it is with the continuations. So that was one impetus to do my own design. And then in terms of being inspired by seeing other people doing it badly, at that time, 2015, 2016, the Alfa Romeo 4C had just come out. And although it looked appealing and had many of the attributes that I wanted in a sports car, they had made such a mess of it. I was inspired by this idea of, well, if a company so large as Alfa can get it so wrong, maybe it's not that difficult. It turns out it is pretty difficult, but that at least gave me the delusion that I could have a go and be successful.
So when we talk about the recreations, like you said about the Stratos replica, the main thing that a replica is trying to achieve is creating something that has already been created and replicating that. You're starting from a blank sheet of paper, so you're able to create your own set of requirements and targets. What did you set in those early days as we are trying to achieve this?
That's so interesting, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the attributes and the values that I wanted. I distilled it down into 3 primary characteristics. I wanted something that was beautiful, first of all, because I think almost there's a moral obligation to, if you are going to create something, you want to try and make it beautiful, because then that brings pleasure to other people. There's also a commercial benefit to beauty, in that people tend to respond to beautiful things more openly, more enthusiastically, and they also tend to look after beautiful things. If you look at, say, classic car ownership, one of the reasons why I think those cars have stayed so relevant and have been cared is, or an antique piece of furniture or a beautiful old piano, is that if it's beautiful, you're going to value it and you're going to care for it. And so from a commercial perspective, if you're looking to build something that has long-term value, you want to make it beautiful so that the owners and the purchasers are inclined to look after it. And then there are all sorts of benefits to that. So beauty was number one. Secondly, I wanted to make it fun to drive. And that was really important. Make it fun to drive. And fun is a loaded word and will mean different things to different people. But in my mind, fun meant involving and to elicit positive emotions, joy and pleasure, as opposed to perhaps anxiety or fear that you get in some of the supercars. So fun to drive was number 2. And then the third one of 3 was to make it properly engineered. And that was really important, because a car is a potentially dangerous thing. And again, going back to this idea that I was originally going to make it for myself, I wouldn't build something that was dangerous if I was going to be driving it and using it myself. So properly engineered. I think when you look at those 3 attributes, it's quite a difficult thing to try and achieve all 3, because they are sometimes a bit mutually exclusive. To have something that's properly engineered and fun to drive, you've got to square the paradox of being lightweight but also solid and structurally rigid. And often cars which are engineered in that way are not necessarily beautiful. That's really where we started. Make it beautiful, make it fun to drive, and make it solidly engineered, properly engineered. Those are the core values. And then it distilled further from there. Obviously, I wanted to make it in the UK, particularly in the Midlands, but that's where I'm from. And I wanted to have an owners club and have a community of enthusiasts around it. I wanted to keep volume small. So those were the secondary attributes as well.
I think maybe some of those will naturally feed into the others, and that if you can create a beautiful car that is engaging for drivers, it's naturally going to appeal to the type of people that are interested in that kind of community aspect of it.
Yeah, very much so.
What's the biggest challenge you've had along the way of trying to bring those 3 things together? You've sort of half touched on the fact that the trade-offs between each of those different attributes may impact each other. Has there been any 1 or 2 particular things that have been hurdles along the way?
I think from a design perspective, there are technical complexities that you encounter all along the way. But I was very lucky early on in the project to be introduced to an outstanding engineer called Robin Hall, who had previously worked at Rover and BMW and worked on the Mini, R50 Mini, and did a lot of the engineering, particularly the front suspension and steering on the Mini, and then worked at JLR. And at that time, Robin was freelance, so we met up, and he solved a lot of the engineering or technical complexities that I wouldn't have been able to do because I'm not from an engineering point of view. And I learned that for engineers, problems are not necessarily an emotional obstacle. They're actually a fun puzzle to try and solve. So it was great for me. I come from an artistic background. It was great for me to meet an engineer of such caliber. So when we talk about the difficulties of starting your own car company or creating a car from scratch, there are two difficulties or two main areas. There's the technical complexity, and then there's the commercial roller coaster. And in a way, the technical complexity is where a lot of people tend to think, oh, that must be really difficult. And yes, of course it is. But difficulty for engineers is not necessarily a dead end. It's more of a challenge if you've got great engineers, which I was happy to have with Robin. The bigger challenge, I think, is the commercial aspect and the continual roller coaster of obstacles on a daily basis. And that could be suppliers, it could be regulations, it could be the wider economic environment. And I think that's where perhaps these sort of projects fall apart.
Tell me about the inspiration for the car. What cars from the past have given you targets to aspire to?
Again, that's really interesting because there are two aspects to that. Let's start with the beginning. The beginning was I wanted to make something compact and relevant and suitable for British roads. Okay. And my starting point there was when I had some of the supercars, they were just ridiculous and unusable or becoming ridiculously large in terms of the width and the constraints on visibility. It was just no fun, and consciously anxious about, a tractor coming down a lane, or you're going to curb your tires because your car is 2.2 meters wide. It's just nonsense. So I started with compactness. I started with size, no more than 4 meters long, 1.75 meters wide. That was my core package constraint. And I knew within that, I wanted to have 2 seats, mid-engine, and so on. But I wanted it to be beautiful. So let's pick up on that. I didn't set out to make something deliberately retro. I wasn't given the brief to update the Mini or make a new Fiat Cinquecento. It was a blank sheet of paper, make something beautiful. And, my background, I studied music and then aesthetics and did a master's degree in museum ethnography. So I was surrounded by beauty throughout my earlier life. And if you break down beauty, I think proportions are a key ingredient to beauty, whether it's music, there's proportions in music that makes a song sound right, and there's proportions in a beautiful face. Proportions was number one. Number two was curves. And I think that curves are a really important part of physical beauty because nature is organically curved. You don't find straight lines in nature. And although there have been really interesting, striking cars featuring straight lines, you think of the wedge cars and Gandini and so on, they were never fully straight anyway to begin with.
No.
So curves was the second aspect that I wanted to integrate, curvaceousness and almost a slightly feminine form. And then the third aspect from a design perspective, which I brought in from music, was this idea of having motifs. So a motif is a pattern or a feature. And the motif that I'm using on the car is this ellipse shape, which is a sort of like almost like the Nike swoop or the McLaren logo. And so I've tried to consciously use that at various points within the car, and by having a motif that repeats itself, you're giving the car a sense of internal reference and cohesion. So that's where I started. I didn't want to make something consciously retro. I wanted to make something consciously beautiful. And accidentally, it ends up looking quite retro because most beautiful cars are in the past.
Yeah.
Because in the 50s and 60s, particularly with the primacy of Italian design houses, as opposed to what we've got now, beauty was paramount. Beauty was a core value as opposed to aggressiveness, which I think we have now. I didn't set out to make something that looked like an E-Type or a D-Type or 250 LM or any of those great cars, but almost by accident, it turns out that we've incorporated elements of both.
It's almost that form follows function in an extreme way, in that you've set those targets. You've said, I want to create a car that's got this form factor that meets these proportional requirements.
Yes.
It naturally then generates the form factor that you have.
Exactly.
Which is that's an interesting approach to it, really.
Yeah.
That is quite different to maybe how a higher volume sports car manufacturer would look at the mathematical targets that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
They'd look at their branding guidelines, and that would inform what comes out. Whereas you taking the approach of, this is what I'm trying to achieve from a tactility and user experience point of view, and from an aesthetic point of view. The colliding of those naturally creates what you've created.
Exactly.
Yeah,
this was the happy product of all of those parameters.
So picking up on two things that you mentioned earlier that I'd like to dig into. Firstly is geography. Obviously, this podcast is very locally focused on Coventry and the surrounding area. You've chosen to base the manufacturing facility in rural Warwickshire. How important was the local area to you in setting this up?
It was firstly Britishness, and specifically Englishness, was a conscious decision from day one. Absolutely. Because I wanted to root the company and the values that it stood for in the UK, because I think the UK has had and still has a supersize brand or association in context of luxury and sports cars. You think of all the great names from the past, many of whom were from this area. Jaguar, Triumph, for example, and then more recently Aston Martin and Jaguar Land Rover. So made in England was really key, so much so that if you look at the badge, you have the name Wells, and then at the bottom part of the badge you have the word England. Like you may have L'Oréal Paris, for example, to anchor that brand in France with all the associations, and you'll have similar brands, luxury leather, perhaps in Italy. So it was a conscious decision to say that this is a sports car and it's made in England. And so much so that we put it on the badge. And then within England, if you're going to choose anywhere to be based, then I think it has to be within this area. You're around Coventry because of you're absolutely steeped in all the heritage, and not only the heritage, but also more practically the logistics, the access to intellectual capital, the good people, the supply chain, the M40, the M1 corridor, Silverstone, Brackley, Gaydon, all of that. So I think that was the second. And then the third overlay is I'm from this area anyway. I was born in Northamptonshire, just over the border. And in fact, again, going back to the badge, the rose in the centre of the Wells badge is the rose of Northamptonshire. And I remember about 10 years ago, I was trying to think of an icon or a logo for the badge and came up with all sorts of different designs, until one day I was driving through, I think it was Long Buckby or somewhere just over the border, and saw at the village entrance the rose of Northamptonshire, and I thought, that's it, that's what I want.
Perfect.
So those were the reasons why I took a conscious decision, and we absolutely adhere to that, in that we're made in England and all of our supply chain is British. So much so that actually 40% is within a 30-mile radius of here. And it was a conscious decision. I could have outsourced manufacturing to Poland or Romania or Vietnam, and we would be more profitable as a result. But I chose not to. And again, I think that if you're going to do something like this, you've got to be authentic about it. So the factory is here, and customers come here, and they see the cars being built here in an old cow shed next to a river with some cows on the other side, and that's very much core to what we're trying to do. We build sports cars in the middle of England for people who like sports cars.
The public reception has been positive, I guess, from that point of view.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's one of the things that our owners tell us that they love the most, this idea that they can come and see their car being built, and they know the person's building their car. They have a relationship with the men who are doing their interior, or they can come and spec everything. And again, that's part of the company's proper positioning, this idea that you can tailor your car, and we personalize it completely, utterly around you. And we invite owners to come up during the build as often as they like, and if they want, they can wield a spanner, get involved, and we really like that
relationship with the customer base. That's something you've mentioned now a few times. That is a key part of what you're trying to achieve, creating a community around the brand and around the cars.
Yeah.
What's been harder, creating the community or creating the cars?
Oh, the community came it was easy. It came as a consequence of building great cars and trying to just be good people, offering a honest product. And the community is lovely. We have a fantastic bunch of owners. Just 2 weekends ago, I was accompanying the Owners Club on a tour of the Peak District, and next year we're hoping to do North Wales and Snowdonia, and it's lovely. By that time we'll have between 12 and 15 cars on the tour, and that's one of the loveliest things that having experienced that myself as being a member of various owners clubs in the past. I think that this really resonates with people, that not only buying a product, but they're buying involvement and participation in something bigger than them, and something that also has value. This idea that Britain can make stuff and make stuff really well, and we have a beautiful country to explore, and there are a lot of really interesting, smart people who make it fun to enjoy your product with.
So you're not pricing the car at an unattainable level, which means that it is something that is quite in keeping with that tradition. The traditional British sports cars were not incredibly expensive. They were an aspirational product that could actually be afforded by many people.
Absolutely. And I think our reference here is Sir William Lyons of Jaguar, and what he did was and that's the model that I'd like to follow. It's something which looks $1 million but is actually surprisingly affordable and open to anyone.
Let's talk a little bit about the numbers. How many cars have you made so far? How many are you going to make?
So we're sitting in the factory, and you're looking at LE15, launch edition 15, and over there is 22. We're slightly out of sequence in the numbers, only because some customers wanted to have their cars sooner, and others were happy to wait whilst they were getting a garage built or something like that. But effectively, we're now into what would be between 10 and 20. We're in that build sequence.
Yep.
By next year, we would have completed all of the first launch editions, so that's effectively 20 to 25 cars.
Yep.
And we're now taking deposits for the next batch, which we're calling the Series 2 cars with a slightly uprated engine.
What comes after Series 2? Do you have long-term plans?
Series 3.
Yeah, well.
But I don't know what it looks like at the moment. No, I mean, we're not going to make an electric sports car. I mean, that's a whole separate discussion, but we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do an SUV. The mission is simple. We just wanted to make what I think is the perfect sports car, and we will continue to refine that. But there's no point setting out to make a perfect sports car and then going into 2+2s or hatchbacks or trying to extend the brand. That's not what we're about as a company. So what we're looking at now, this is the center tub. which is laser cut and folded steel. Yeah. So if you can imagine, let's use an analogy, a cardboard box. Yeah. So a piece of card by itself is relatively floppy. You turn it into a box and it becomes a stronger structure. So our center tub, which is the passenger compartment, is an extremely strong, extremely stiff structure because it's all laser cut and folded box sections, which we actually foam fill.
Fill with foam.
You can see. Yeah. And the reason for that, it's not necessarily about the rigidity, it's more for the noise.
Yeah, makes sense.
Resonance. Yeah. So this is the center monocoque tub. Yeah. Which is all folded steel with aluminium floor pans, onto which you have a integrated roll cage.
Yeah.
Adds to the rigidity of the center compartment and gives the crash protection, rollover protection. And then to the front and the rear of that, we add triangulated subframes built out of heavy-duty box section steel, relatively simple. That's the front subframe, and there's the rear subframe. And
these being fabricated close by. You said about the supply chain being very, very local. Are these coming in from local suppliers?
Yeah, absolutely. These ones were made locally, and then I'll show you the body also, which is made just up the road in Daventry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the way that we build the cars is we made these dollies so that everything is at readily accessible height when you're building. And we build up the subframe off the car, front and rear, and then effectively we wheel it to the relevant mounting points on the tub and join them together. And that's a process that we call marriage. And after marriage, continue to build up a little bit, and then we drop the body shell on top. The key thing there is that the body shell is not structural. It's just purely cosmetic to keep the rain out and look pretty. The structure is all in the chassis. It forms this tremendously stiff backbone, which allows us then to be relatively compliant and soft on the suspension.
Yeah. So you got double wishbone suspension.
Double wishbones all around. Yeah.
Is this all bespoke wishbones?
Yeah, the wishbones are bespoke, designed by Robin Hall of Hall Engineering and Design. These are our own hubs, but we have Vauxhall Astra brake discs. So the ingredient here, or the recipe here, is to, as much as possible, use readily available off-the-shelf components on the consumables, things like brake pads, brake discs, obviously the engine, oil filters, air filters, all available off the shelf. Yeah, and these are Faulkner springs and Specs adjustable dampers.
Excellent. Any upgrades coming to the chassis as part of the Series 2, or is it just an engine upgrade?
Yeah, as part of the Series 2 cars, what we'll be doing is finding another 70 millimeters of legroom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that will then allow anybody up to 6'3", 6'4" to sit in as comfort. I think on the original ones, I've done a bit of a Chapman and designed the car around myself, and I'm only 5'10". So we were capping out at maybe 6 foot, 6'1" maximum on these first cars. But that's something we're addressing with the Series 2 cars.
Perfect. Okay, so as we carry along, we've got a chassis and some subframes. Now we have a car approaching a complete car here.
Yep. So as you can see, what happened between the bare chassis structure and getting to this stage was we would have put the body on, the glass fiber shell. Yep. As I said, it's not non-structural, it's purely cosmetic. Then body working will build up the doors, put the doors on, and you can imagine what a piece of engineering that is. Yeah,
the dihedral door on its own is quite a major undertaking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the reason for the dihedral door was because we wanted to have so much stiffness in the chassis. Yeah, and that meant having a sill quite high and quite wide. And similar. Yeah, if you had a conventional door line, there'd be no way of getting in. So we had to scallop out all of that area. But the benefit is that you have extremely small
opening width. Yeah, so you can fit into narrow gaps.
Yeah.
So looking at the interior of this car here, we've got quite a nice sort of tartaned wool pattern on the door and leather cladding. How much personalization can an owner have?
Completely. It's any color. Any color on the outside, we spray to order. And it makes no difference to us whether it's a plain white or any color. given our low volume. So we're able to do a level of personalization that you wouldn't find at this price point anywhere else.
Absolutely.
And it's a pleasure for us. We love working with the customers and speccing their exterior paints. We've got some really exciting ones. This one is a brand new Ferrari color called Verdi Francesca. Then we have a purple coming up next. We've got a couple of oranges, and then we've got a gold car. So it's all, we really enjoy that. And same for the interior. Customers can spec any interior. We work with Connolly leather as well as Bridge of Weir and Muirhead. And also that's a great pleasure. So you can see what we're doing now. The body panels all went to paint just up the road in Southam, nearby, and came back about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Then we do the interior fit out to all the insulation, sound deadening, carpets, electrics, put the remaining body panels on. And now Alex, one of our technicians here, is going to be painting the headlamp recesses this morning.
Perfect. And we can see some engines on dollies next to the car. What's the story with the engine using a Ford Duratec?
Ford Duratec 2 litre as standard. That was the standard. And we're moving to the 2.5 litre. As a run-out special edition, before we moved to the Series 2 cars, we offered our owners the option of having their 2 litre upgraded to 250 horsepower, working with local engine specialists. And I thought that was going to be a limited production run, but it turned out that pretty much every customer wanted it. So what was going to be the special edition is now the standard, and the standard is kind of the special edition.
We had some finished cars next.
Yep, let's go and have a look at some finished cars. We're now looking at launch edition number 9, LE9, which is a customer car. And we displayed that at the Wilton House concourse last weekend down in Salisbury. This car is a lovely, very special car in that customer wanted a couple of special tweaks on this car. First of all, instead of the red rose of Northamptonshire, he wanted a white rose of his home county.
Excellent.
So we did that. We made up a special badge set, and this is a one of one, the only car in the world to have that white rose badge.
Fantastic.
Secondly, this is the first car to have the what we're calling the race specification engine, the 250 horsepower engine. This was the car featured in Autocar magazine a couple of months ago, which where they gave us 4.5 stars out of 5 for ride and performance and handling, which was great. They loved it. Fantastic.
It's great as a first step out of the box to get that. That's great reaction.
Yes, to get a star rating equivalent to the Porsche Cayman.
Yeah.
Given this is actually the ninth car built.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Wow, I think how many thousands of Caymans have been built.
Yes. Yeah, really.
I guess the Cayman is probably the closest competitor you have in terms of size, price, engine configuration.
Yeah, very much so. I would say that where do we position ourselves? Well, for the Lotus literates, we're halfway between an Elise and an Evora. We've got all the compactness of an Elise, but perhaps the maturity of an Evora. For the non-Lotus, it would be somewhere between an MX-5 and a Cayman with a bit of Ferrari Dino thrown in.
But with a level of personalisation that you'd never get.
You'll never get unless you're going to spend 400,000 with one of the supercar or premium manufacturers. So we think that's our USP. Again, going back to this idea of something that's beautiful, fun to drive, properly engineered, but also can be personalized and totally tailored.
Yeah.
Again, looking at this car, the customer wanted Jaguar opalescent silver blue, which was an E-Type color from the early E-Types. And we were very happy to do that. As it happened, when we sprayed up a panel in the original Jaguar color, it just looked a little bit flat relative to modern metallics.
Okay.
So we've mixed this one up specially. This is a
bit more pop to it.
A bit more pop.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, very good. And then behind us here, we're looking at the car's exhaust system. And this exhaust we made up as a display for the British Motor Museum.
Okay.
Where it was been on display for the last year and just came back to us a couple of weeks ago. And the reason why the exhaust is so interesting is a couple of reasons. First of all, it's extremely compact. Given our mid-engine location, obviously the exhaust is running behind that. But what I wanted was, it was important to me that the car should be practical. that we have a deep boot at the wheel. We also have a frunk at the front.
Yeah.
So it was really important that we have a deep boot that would allow you to have carry-on luggage, the sort of Ryanair EasyJet type bags. Yep. In order to achieve that depth in the boot, I moved the silencer, which would typically be outside the car, underneath at the bottom. I moved it up and brought it into the engine bay.
See that?
Yeah, you can see that there. Yeah. In doing so, by having the silencer there visible in the engine bay, obviously you've got something beautiful to look at, but it also meant that we had to run the tube, the exhaust pipe, around one more loop than you would have traditionally. Yep. And you'll know perhaps from trombones and in orchestras and bands that if you make a tube longer, the pitch gets deeper. So although we have a small 4-cylinder engine, the exhaust node is actually quite deep and thrummy because we've got that extra loop in the exhaust. That was a happy coincidence.
Bringing your musical background into car design.
Yeah, very much so.
I guess from a layout point of view, the 4-cylinder engine lends itself to that as well in the way that you can package both transversely across the car. It almost becomes a natural way to package those.
Absolutely.
In the engine bay.
It's a really lovely piece of packaging in that we've got all of the drivetrain, all the powertrain there in that relatively small box area, a large boot behind, space for either a front at the front or full-size spare wheel.
You can see actually that it's sort of in line with the back of the rear tyre is where the engine compartment finishes and all of the packaging of the exhaust finishes at that point.
Yeah.
So everything you can see behind the tyre line has got to be available for storage.
For storage, yeah, exactly. Yes.
That's clever bit of packaging.
Thank you.
What's the use case of the car? Is the use case a tour of the Peak District, or are you thinking that it's more of a...
Well, I use mine daily. I've been driving my car, which is P4, the prototype 4, effectively. That's my daily driver.
Excellent.
And again, I think that's really important that if we're selling the cars, not only do we have to know them in terms of their durability and their reliability and their livability, but I think it's if you're going to, it shows your confidence in the product, really.
Yeah.
It would seem to me a little bit disingenuous to be selling something and not driving it, turning up to work in a Volkswagen Golf, for example.
So how many miles have you put on that?
That's 40,000 at least. And Robin Hall, he drives P3, his prototype, and that's at least 50,000.
Oh, wow.
So we're using these cars on a daily basis. Yeah. But to your question about usage case, most of our customers will have 2 or 3 other cars.
Yeah.
And so this can be a weekend car, but it's a weekend getaway. It's not just a trip to the pub on a Sunday evening. It's a weekend getaway. You go up to Scotland, go up to Wales. One customer last year went down to Switzerland, to St. Moritz, and participated in the Concours d'Elegance in St. Moritz, where they won a prize in their Vertige. It's fantastic.
Wow. That's great.
I went with them. So there were 2 Vertiges in convoy. We went across France, down to St. Moritz, did the rally, came back, absolutely no issue. And again, that goes back to this idea of using proven components from OEMs. It's got a Ford engine, it's a Ford gearbox. It's all been engineered to work and to last. So there's nothing that we're prototyping on these cars.
Is it comfortable to drive for long distance?
Yeah, really comfortable.
Power steering and
no power steering, no power brakes. But again, it's so lightweight. It only weighs 860 kilograms dry, which is phenomenal. Yeah, so with 2 people on board and all the fluids, you're still under 1,000 kilograms. So super comfortable, great hit point, great driving position, superb visibility. It's just lovely. You can drive it for hours and hours on end. Yeah, nobody's doing it. And we didn't anticipate that when I started the project in 2016. There were players. Obviously, you had the MX-5, which still exists, but there was the Lotus Elise, the Exige, there was the Alpha 4C, there was the Ginetta G40. And virtually all of those have vacated the space, Lotus most particularly. So it's effectively a whole wide open goal for us to go at. But we want to keep it real. It's no more than 20, 25 cars a year maximum.
Interesting point. The logo you said about having England on the logo is something that that's another thing that from a design point of view that almost unintentionally harks back to a lot of the brands that we've spoken about before.
Yes.
I mean, Jaguar used to have Jaguar Coventry was their logo.
Yes.
And Alfa Romeo had Milano,
Milano.
on the logo for a very, very long time.
Exactly.
It's definitely a sort of a hark back to those brands.
And this idea of rooting it physically in a place, I love that concept because, like with Morgan and Malvern, place has relevance to objects, particularly in a time where I think erroneously manufacturers think that they can just spread things globally and it doesn't matter whether your car is made in a completely different country of origin. No, I think that's wrong. I think it does matter, and I think that it has relevance and value and significance that these cars are made here where they are. I'm thinking of, using a musical example, Stradivarius violins. One of the reasons why those violins sound so amazing is because they come from particular wood that grows only in that area of Cremona in northern Italy, which you can't find that wood elsewhere. Yeah, so there is a relevance and a significance of place to a product, and that shouldn't be forgotten.
What does Coventry mean to you as a car enthusiast? If I said the motor industry in Coventry, what do you think of?
Jaguar. Yeah, Jaguar, and then I'm guessing Roots, Standard, Triumph, historically. Also, I had family working at Jaguar back in the day, so there's a resonance there, and stories of my father about the E-Type or what a prototype E-Type going up the motorway at very illegal speeds before it had been announced. So yes, so Coventry means it's the UK's motor town, motor city, isn't it?
Huge thanks to Robin Wells for sharing the story of this exciting new brand and for access to the Wells Motor Cars facilities and the team shaping the Vertige. You can find more about their work through the Wells Motor Cars online channels. You can find more about their work through Wells Motor Cars online and on their official channels. I'll put links in the show notes below. It was great to spend time with Robin behind the scenes, inside the workshop and studying the cars in their finished form. While you're online taking a look at Wells, you can also follow this podcast on Instagram. We're at MotorCityPod, all one word, no spaces. You'll see behind the scenes updates and more from the people, places and vehicles connected to Britain's original motor city. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast on your listening app of choice. Leave us a review and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps more people discover these stories. And join us next time as we continue exploring the city of Coventry's unique relationship with transport, engineering, and the motor car.